Welcome to the Reversion to the Mean podcast, hosted by Justin Castelli of RLS Wealth Management and Kevin of ferventfinance.com. On Reversion to the Mean, Justin and Kevin will discuss the week's top financial Twitter shares and distill them down to what's necessary and what's noise. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing discussed on this podcast should be considered professional advice. The opinions expressed by the hosts are theirs and theirs only.
Welcome to episode 44 of Reversion to the Mean. This week, we're going to kick it off with some parents brawling at a youth baseball game out in Lakewood, Colorado. The reason I wanted to share this one is we like to mix in some sports into this finance podcast because that's something Justin and I both like. And I wanted to get Justin's take because I know his two older boys are very involved in youth sports. So I was curious if he had seen anything like this. But just a little background, it was a 7-year-old baseball game out in Colorado. There was a 13-year-old ump. And some of the parents got mad at one of the calls the 13-year-old ump made. So the parents somehow got out onto the field and started beating the crap out of each other at a 7-year-old baseball game. And I've never seen this before. I don't remember as a kid. I did a lot of Little League baseball as a kid. I don't remember parents ever getting into a fist fight on the field. So I'm hoping this is kind of a one-off occurrence. But with Michael Lewis's podcast Against the Rules, I think it was his first episode where he was talking about how people have started to hate refs more, even though refs have involved analytics in their job and they're actually getting better. People hate refs more now today. So I'm wondering if this all is kind of intertwined, but hopefully it's not something that you've seen too often, Justin.
I've never seen a brawl, but I'm willing to bet that the ref was not the cause of the fight. My guess is the ref it's the scapegoat. Like that's the thing that these parents could use to go after each other. Because honestly, the behavior at youth sporting events is disgusting. Like Roman, there's a field house nearby that he played basketball at, and it is horrible what the parents say to each other, to kids on the other team. And like this was a 7-year-old, so Roman's going to be 9. I've never seen a fight. I've seen it pretty close. I've seen cops called to break things up. But it's I don't know. I can't understand. I don't understand why parents do that. I mean, obviously they want their child to do well, but to get going back and forth between each other is ridiculous. And we've had teammates of Roman's parents like do that. And it's just kind of embarrassing. You sit there and you're just kind of embarrassed to be a part of it because you're guilty by association. Just because your child's on the team with their child, everybody assumes that that's your way. And I'm not very vocal at games. I just kind of sit back and let it go. But the thing is, like, I don't know if parents realize this or not, but that tension from the crowd carries over onto the court, at least from what I've seen in basketball. And then it starts to get chippy on the court as well. So now you have parents chirping at each other. You've got players going at it and they start to get physical, and that just accelerates the parents getting mad at each other, and just a recipe for disaster. I just think that first off, parents need to lay back. I don't care how old your kids are, high school, middle school, 7th grade, just lay back. Like, you getting worked up in the stands doesn't help anything. And it's just crazy. I talked about how expensive youth sports is. You layer that on with the disgusting behavior of parents, and it's I don't know, it's just sad. And this fight, I saw that video when it happened. In the picture in the article in the Wall Street Journal, if you could check out the links, there's the guy in the white shirt winding up. Like, he cold cocked that guy, blindsided him, and I think that he got arrested for it because he can't. If you watch the video, he came out of nowhere.
Good. Yeah, it's just
totally
nuts. The anger obviously has to, these parents must be mad about something else, whether, they're unhappy in their day and things have been going wrong. And then you had a few parents from opposing teams that both were having bad days, and, it kind of spiraled from there. So at least you hope that's the case, and not that they're really getting this excited just about their 7-year-old's baseball game. And the writer of this article talked about how there's, some parents like Tiger Woods' dad, who was basically like, Tiger Woods is going to be a golfer from day one and was training him since he could walk to play golf, where Roger Federer's parents were kind of like, don't take it so seriously, try out all these different sports, and kind of had the reverse parenting methodology there. And Roger Federer became one of the greatest tennis players ever. So, I don't think everyone needs to pretend that they're going to be Tiger Woods' dad and like their kid's going to be the next Tiger Woods in their respective sport or anything like that, and take it super seriously, because I'm sure there's all these other athletes that are just as good and they didn't take it as seriously. And then obviously the fact that it's like a 1 in a million shot to become like a professional with regard to athletics.
My stance on parents in the crowd, you should only cheer for your team and you should only be cheering in a positive way. And that's not like to like take away the fact that it's a competitive environment, but you don't need to say anything to another team's children. And honestly, I don't think you should say anything about even your child's teammates, like pass the ball. Like that's the stuff that gets people worked up, is don't talk about my kid. And then they go back and forth. So unless it's a positive, like cheer positive, cheers your team on, don't need to say anything else. And I think this would go a lot easier, but it just compounds. And I'm telling you, man, it's almost a scary feeling because you don't know if it's going to erupt to something like that. And then how does it stop? What do you do? You've got kids there. What is the example that you're setting? People just need to relax. It's baseball.
I think we
Oh,
should
they
leave
will
it.
say though, the only thing is baseball is the one sport I'm so glad the boys don't play, because it's 90 degrees the last few days, and the thought of sitting out in the heat, wow. And youth baseball, there's a lot good in it, but it's also a very slow, boring sport to sit out in the heat. So I'm glad they don't play that. That may have been why they fought. They just want to get the game over with. So let's go to blows so this game gets canceled and we all go home.
All right.
From bad parents to good parents. So
Here you
put
go.
in a post. I thought about that beforehand. That's why I stole that transition. I really wanted to say that. For our buddy Douglas Bonaparte wrote a post called Daddy Daycare, and he just was talking about his wife going back to work. They just had their second child. So the time has come where her maternity leave's over, and kind of how they've managed that. And Douglas is a great dad, very flexible schedule, much like myself. I talk to him every Friday morning, and he's always at home Friday morning with the kids helping out. So I know that what he's talking about here is actually real and it's not fake, but it is something that, at the end, it starts talking about paternity leaves and dads taking time off from work to be at home with the child. And I'm all for that. I think that not only from a standpoint of being able to help mom, but also like those first few weeks are so, I think they're so important in the baby's life, just to be there and be a part of it and help mom out and be there with that, connecting with the child. I think that's pretty important. And I was fortunate enough to be able to do that with all three boys. Whether when we had Roman, I worked at the 403B company and I still had a flexible schedule where I could do that. And then Leo, I still was able to do that as well. And then with Silas, I had my company, so I took as much time as I needed and sprinkled in some work, but I, didn't need to be there. And for the most part, at least with our profession, clients understand what it's like to be a parent. They have children. As long as they know they can get you if they need it or get somebody, they're not going to have an issue with it. So I think it's an important thing to do.
Yeah, what really caught my eye with this post was the tweet that Douglas had started it with, where he asked, "Gentlemen, I have a very important question. If you were offered paternity leave, would you take it?" Now, this is Twitter, and who knows if people were just trolling or not, but 18% of people said, "No, I got to go to work." And that just surprised me. And I know, I don't want to get into kind of like, the perspective of like, the father's role or the mother's role, and then the work and then parenting. But that just surprised me, because I have a lot of friends right now who are at the age where they're having kids. And so they're, researching their paternity leave policies at work and trying to decide how to take it. Because I think it's great now where, fathers are starting to get a similar amount of time to mothers, so they're able to help out in that way while still being able to earn a paycheck. So Douglas had talked about a few different ways to do it, whether you take that concurrently with the mom, or you will start yours when the mom ends, so that you can kind of keep the consistency going where one parent is still able to stay home. There's just a lot of different ways to do it. But yeah, I was still surprised by that. Almost 20% of guys said no, they wouldn't take it.
I wonder if any of them were not assuming they would get paid. I mean, obviously it'd be a paid paternity. He didn't put that. So I wonder if maybe they thought if they didn't work, didn't get paid. Hopefully they would be smart enough to know that the paternity leave would be covered. But speaking of time, when we had Roman, Angela got 6 weeks off. She accepted a position while she was pregnant, and they didn't know she was pregnant. And as like time came by, and she put in her notice, and when she started, she came back and like her stomach had popped. So they had no idea they hired a pregnant woman, but they couldn't do anything about it. But because she wasn't there for a year, she only got 6 weeks. And I remember that was real hard for her to go back, and it was hard for us to find childcare for a 6-week-old that we really could trust. And luckily we were able to. But then since then with Leo and like with Silas, there's days of the week where I'll come home early to get the boys so we can take care of them. So if you have a flexible schedule, I think it's easier. I think one of the things that Douglas brought up in here, he talked about from like the business standpoint, people may argue that it's expensive to give paid family time off. And he said that he'd argue the short-term expense is far outweighed by the long-term benefits for both the business and the employee. And I 100% agree with that. I think that's the difference between maybe being a private business owner versus a public business owner. I think you can take a longer term perspective. You're not being judged quarter to quarter in expenses, where it's much more beneficial for a business to offer good benefits like that to retain good employees. That yes, it might cost you something, but you're not going to have to rehire somebody. They're not going to leave you. There's more loyalty to you as a employer because you took care of them when their family needed it. So I think it's money well invested in your employees to offer a paternity leave.
Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at, if it's an option, I just don't understand why you wouldn't take it. I mean, this is just my perspective, but your career, like your career is not that important. I'm sorry, like just take the time, help out, and yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that.
Well, I'll add one thing to that, and I think that as you have more friends that have children, you're going to be surprised at how many old school mindset men there are, and also some guys are not good fathers, and they don't really want anything to do with being a father, which is crazy to say, especially in my personal position. Like I have a crush on my boys still in Romans 9. Like I think about it all the time. So for me it's very hard, but I know families where like the dad doesn't really want to be a hands-on father. So it's kind of like, I'm just going to go provide, you take care of the kids, you're happy because you have a child, and this is our business relationship of our marriage. So you'll be surprised because you'll see it come across with people that maybe you wouldn't have expected it. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. It's just like, that's not the way I would do it, but you'll be surprised. Watch.
Well, thanks for taking us down that dark rabbit hole.
Yeah. Hey man, we keep it real. We keep it honest here.
So I'll share a little bit of personal news. We had an offer accepted on a house. Right now we're still going through that process. We still have to do the inspection. And the last time we had an inspection, we ended up walking away from a house because it turned up some water damage, and that wasn't something we wanted to deal with. So we're not at the end of the road yet, but we're giving it a shot again. So I thought it was pretty timely that Michael Batnick shared this post about titled American Living, where he went through Zillow's consumer housing trends report from 2018 and pulled out some interesting data points. So I thought a few of these were pretty surprising to me. So I just want to share a few of those. And one of them was 60% of first-time homebuyers put down less than 20%. Now I thought that would,
you?
I thought it would be like 80 or 90%
okay.
of first-time home buyers would put down less than 20%. I guess you kind of forget about these certain areas where the home prices are more in line with like medium wages, and I'm sure that happens, in the Midwest compared to the coastal towns and cities. So that's probably what's helping that statistic out there. But because if you're in Boston, I'm sure this number is probably like 98%, unless it also brings the higher income jobs out there. But yeah, I was kind of surprised. That's pretty good. What did you think about that stat?
I didn't really. That one was the one that jumped out to me. I'm with you. I think. Well, yeah, I think I would have thought it'd been higher. That more people would have. But I also wonder if that's a little bit of fallout from regulatory stuff out of the recession, because it took a while. Like before it, Ange was working in new home sales, and they were doing like 80-15 5s, no documented income loans. And once we got out of the recession, it was very stringent on who they gave money to. And I've seen it starting to loosen up as of late, but I wonder if that's a little bit of it. But yeah, I'm with you. I would have thought that would have been higher. One of the stats that surprised me was I was actually surprised that more people are renting in the suburbs than in the city. It was like a 7%. I think it's like 67% of, was it rental in, I can't remember what it was. It was close. where was it? 47% of renters in the suburbs, 40% in urban areas. So I would have thought more people would be renting in the city and more
Hmm.
people would be owning out in the suburbs, because I thought you move from the city to the suburbs to start a family. So that was a number that jumped out to me.
Yeah, and this one did not surprise me. Home equity remains the biggest financial asset for the typical American homeowner, who has 52% of their wealth tied up in their home. That's just it's pretty crazy to think about. And just from a asset allocation perspective, you have half of your net worth tied up in an asset that's not liquid, that basically over the course of the past 100 years in the US, just to, kind of appreciates with inflation. And yeah, it's your home, so it's not actually yielding any income like perhaps like a rental home would, or a dividend paying stock or anything like that. So it's kind of tough, because when you're in need, it's hard to tap that asset for when you need to, because I mean there's HELOCs and other ways out there, but it's just not very liquid. And who knows, like if the big company goes bankrupt in your town, that could have a direct impact. That one company could have a direct impact on the value of your home. So it's just not a very diversified portfolio when half of people's net worth is tied up in their home.
I was going to ask you what you thought about that. I think that though is a good representation that a home is also a forced savings vehicle,
Yeah.
because people are making their mortgage payments, and part of that's going to principal, accumulating that equity, which just shows that automation is a very good way to build wealth and kind of set it up and get it going. So it's not a surprise, because that money has to go to the mortgage and it gets set aside and works down the principal. So I just think that shows your house is more of a forced savings vehicle, but to your point, it's not the most efficient saving
Yeah.
vehicle from the standpoint of liquidity and return. But it's not surprising. It makes sense though. But I'm with you. I don't know if there's a way to fix that though, because if you own a home, depending on your situation, it's probably your biggest expense. So if that's eating up a big part of your budget, you can't save elsewhere. Yeah, I don't know if there is a fix or if it's a huge problem. It's just to be aware of it, I think.
Yeah, and then one more stat that surprised me was at 31%, millennials are the largest group of sellers of homes,
Hmm.
which that surprised me. So what I think's happening there is people are buying that starter home and then turning around once they start having a family or earning more income and buying the bigger house. And from what the stats have showed us, buying a starter home is very expensive, and it's usually because of the transactional costs.
Hmm.
So you buy a house, you're paying closing costs, you have to maintain the home, and then if you sell it 5 or 7 years later, you're paying the 5 to 6% for the seller's agent. So that's going to be probably 10 grand plus, depending on how much your house costs right there, that you're going to have to spend just to get rid of it. And if that home didn't appreciate the $10,000 over time, you're going in the hole just because you decided to sell your house 5 to 7 years later. And I think people get caught up in in the whole rent is throwing money away mentality. Which, if you're, I don't, you shouldn't be buying a home in my mind unless you think you're going to stay there for at least 10, maybe 15 years, because of the transaction costs are so high. And I know there's external factors. People can lose their job, or they change jobs, or they have a family that they weren't planning on. And there's all these other external things that can kind of happen once you buy a home that will make you, or potentially have you, buy another house. But for the things you can control, if you're thinking you're going to buy a house and only stay in it for 5 years, you really need to do the math, because it's probably going to be more expensive than renting.
Yeah, my final thought was going to be that this just shows that your primary residence is not really an investment, and you hit on a lot of the reasons why. Um, Social Security, you put in Investment News had an article about retirees losing 3.4 trillion by claiming Social Security too early, which to me, this is from a financial advisor standpoint. Social Security strategies is like low hanging fruit to separate yourself from like the brokers and the non advisors of the world, because you can drive a lot of value, a lot of extra income over someone's lifetime by helping them coordinate Social Security strategies and when they're going to take it and everything there. But what was it about this that got you all excited?
Yeah, so my parents are just entering their 60s, and I have a bunch of family members that are in their 60s and have either started taking Social Security or starting to think about it when they should take it. So this was something that I wasn't very knowledgeable about at all, probably 2 years ago, but I have started looking into more and more, and it just kind of it's crazy how few people wait until they're 70, which a lot of times is the where you get your maximum benefit if you wait till 70 instead of taking it at 62. And the craziest stat here is only 4% of retirees wait until they're age 70 to claim their maximum Social Security benefits. That is crazy in my mind. And one of the greatest benefits of Social Security that there is that it is kind of like a longevity insurance policy. So if the higher earning spouse passes away, their spouse is entitled to their benefit. So the higher earning spouse waits until 70, they pass away, the other spouse gets that higher benefit. So, but the problem is, and this article goes into that, is that a lot of people rely on their Social Security as their primary retirement benefit, which is unfortunate because if they stop working at, say, 62, 63, 64, they have no other choice but to claim Social Security, when if they were able to work a little bit longer or save some other money to kind of bridge that gap until 70, they would be able to take their maximum benefit, which goes up with has a cost of living adjustment every year. So it's gonna keep up with inflation. There's like no other investment product out there like Social Security. So I think there should be more strenuous research that goes into a person's when they're going to start taking Social Security. And I think a lot of the times people have said, "Oh, I've paid into it for 40 plus years. I want to take it now at 62," when it's suboptimal and can cost households over $111,000 per year, which is a pretty big number.
I
No,
think
sorry,
some
$110,000 per household for their
lifetime.
life. Yeah.
I think some of it is just not knowing and understanding. Financial literacy is not strong, and there's a lot of people who just don't know there's these other options. You get your statement and you see that, but I don't think they realize the impact of delaying. So I think that's part of it. Another thing that is just from experience, it's not easy for people to start spending their retirement money. And the reason I bring that up is they may have accumulated enough that would allow them to bridge that gap, but they're so reluctant to spend that money because once it's gone in their mind, it's gone. And they're not able to visualize, well, we're going to drain that down some. And then at 70, you don't have to use it anymore. Now you have a higher benefit. So I think there's also that reluctancy to actually spend their nest egg. They'd rather just collect Social Security. And then you have the irrational thoughts of, well, I want to get it now before it goes bankrupt or it's not around. I'm going to get something before it's gone. Ashley Daniels did a great piece showing how that's not going to happen. It's not true. There's easy ways for it to be fixed. That even if there's something, even just tax dollars alone cover 80% of Social Security benefits, and there's some minor things they could do to the tax code that would fund it for like another 100 years. So that's not a reason to draw it early on. But like I said, for a financial advisor, very few financial advisors know about these different strategies, spousal strategies, and different things that you can do. So that's a differential. And there's a lot of great tools out there that will help you do the calculations for yourself. I mean, I've done them on Excel spreadsheets, and then I use maximize my Social Security, and it will run all these different scenarios, and then you can compare the scenarios so you can see what's the difference. And just because 70 is the most optimal from the standpoint that you get the most, it doesn't always mean that's the best course of action. You've got to take into consideration that longevity needs to be on your side for that delay of till 70 to make sense. So if you know that you don't have longevity in your family, or you have a health issue that realistically there's the likelihood of you living into your 80s and beyond isn't going to happen, then maybe go ahead and take it. Or maybe you do some type of split where one spouse takes it at 66 and one spouse takes it at 70. So you're kind of catching both sides. But it is something that's worth looking at because it can make a big difference. Sometimes it doesn't. I've seen scenarios where, depending on their age, it's like $30,000 over their lifetime. At that point, it's a coin flip. Take whatever makes you happier and don't worry about it. But $100,000 over your lifetime is pretty significant. And the other thing, delaying also allows you to do like Roth conversion strategies along the way and set things up for the long term. So there's a lot of good reasons beyond just getting a higher payment to consider and at least evaluate it. My standpoint is, let's evaluate it. Let's look at it. Let's decide what we think is the best scenario, and then we'll take it year by year. So if our plan is to wait until 70 and 67 rolls around and something's changed and now we want to take it, then let's do it. But we've saved you, a number of years. We've increased it over some time rather than just saying I'm taking it at 62 and that's it. I had a client, she's no longer a client, but I had a client that was dead set at taking it at 62, ran all the numbers, showed her. And so my close, which I don't consider myself a salesperson, but my close to getting her to delay it, or at least consider taking year by year, was I asked her, I said, okay, if God forbid something happens and you passed away early, are you going to be up in heaven looking down, mad that you didn't take Social Security? And she said, yes. And I was like, all right, then you take it whenever you want. And then let's talk about whether or not it makes sense for me to help you, since the advice I'm giving you, you're not going to take, which is one of the few clients I've had to do that with. So anyways, sometimes you can't overcome that irrational and you just kind of have to let them go.
Yeah, and if you're if your parents are getting to that age where they're getting close to 62 and they're starting to think about taking Social Security, just want to give a shout out to Mike Piper of the Oblivious Investor. He has a great blog, and he's written a book on Social Security strategies, and he has a free calculator in there where you input a person's date of birth, their spouse's date of birth, who is the higher income earner, and it kind of spits out, and it's a free calculator, when the optimal time to take Social Security is from a financial perspective. And he's been on all sorts of podcasts, and he's kind of the pro when it comes to Social Security. So if you want to learn more, I would check out his blog. And then Justin, you shared a post from Of Dollars and Data. Are smarter people better investors?
So when I read that, I immediately thought, is this going to be just like accredited investors aren't always better investors? So accredited investors, you have to have an income above a certain amount, 200 or something like that, or a net worth of over $1 million to do some investments. And that's supposed to signify that you are a better investor or you're smarter or something, when a lot of times those investors aren't. They make bad decisions. So I was wondering if this is going to be the same, but actually through Nick's research, it does show that smarter people are better investors, but it's not because they're picking better stocks or their smarts are giving them any advantage from a information standpoint. It's more about the behavior side of things. They make less bad decisions, and it could be from a standpoint of they understand the game better, that they know there's ups and downs, and not to make those impulse decisions when it comes to investments, or they just know themselves better. So they put themselves in better portfolios or whatever it might be to stick to the long-term plan. But I thought it was going to be a catch and say, no, they're not, but it actually is that they are, but not probably in the way that you would initially think. I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, I don't have too much to share on this post, but what I was thinking, like, what do I think makes me a better than average investor, if I am at all? And it's not that I research the investments more, or spend more time on it, or am smarter. I think what makes me a better investor is just that I don't get emotional. And so I think, rather than being smarter than other investors, I think the people who can control their emotions the most will actually be the better investor.
And I think another thing is, I think a lot of your quote unquote smart investors have realized that sometimes less is more. So keeping a more simplified, diversified, low cost portfolio, managing those emotions is going to do better over the long run than trying to pick stocks and chase things. So I think that also comes with education, either education through experience or just reading and educating yourself on what has worked over the long run, and not listening to your cousin who has a great stock tip. So that's all the more reason that we need financial literacy, one, and two, that you should take it upon yourself to educate yourself and read the blogs and everything that's out there just to become smarter, because Nick Majuli said it'll make you a better investor.
And our next one has somewhat of a controversial title to some. Student loans are not a national crisis. And this is from your pal, Andrew Thrasher. What were your thoughts on this one?
First off, I don't think it's controversial. Like, big picture, it's not controversial. And I'm not going to get into all the numbers because Andrew does a great job. So Andrew he's a technical analyst, very smart when it comes to charts and numbers and research driven. But he lays the numbers out. Now, I say that it's not big picture. Individualized, it is a national crisis, because if you are somebody who's drowning in student loan debt, then you feel like it is a big deal. And this all comes up because of a few of the Democratic, not nominees, candidates, whatever you want to call them, are proposing to forgive student loans either entirely or up to a certain point. And that would be a very costly thing to do. And Andrew wrote a great piece that shows that it's not as big of a problem as they make it seem. Again, it's individualized, not to take it away. There are people who have big issues, but economically across the whole US, it's not as big as they make it seem. And it's not going to fix the overall problem of high tuition, rising tuition that's at faster than inflation, the ability to get these loans. And he even highlights how much free money that's out there that people aren't even using. He talks about grants and people who don't file FAFSA and what that meant. I forget the number of people who didn't do it, but he cites how many people didn't file for FAFSA. And that's like $3,500 in financial aid that people could have gotten, which would have covered, half a year of tuition for some people. So there's a lot of resources out there. We have to be more mature when it comes to looking to student loans and understanding it, but wiping them out, one, isn't good for the economy, and two, isn't going to fix the problem. We'll be right back there in 10 years and doing it again. But it sounds good. It rallies up younger voters, and that's really all it is. And at the end of the day, I don't think either of them could get this type of bill passed anyway. So it's just pandering to people trying to get votes, which is why I hate politics. But I thought Andrew laid it out to make it so it wasn't controversial. Here are the numbers. This is not opinion. Here's the numbers. Yes, it sucks for you if you're there. Let's figure out a way to be disciplined. Like he talks about, him and his wife had student loans. They worked hard. They saved money. They paid them down. And then for the future, let's talk about more disciplined ways to go about college. There's places like the Lambda School. There's a lot of other options out there. So I thought this was real good just because we're going to hear this more and more as these debates come on and we go through the presidential cycle. And I think it's BS personally.
Yeah, and I've seen this number thrown around a ton where the average American has a little over $35,000 in student loan debt. And when you think about that, you think, in my mind, it's like, okay, everyone has $35,000 in student loan debt. But when you actually look at the numbers around that, only 15% of people carry that much debt burden. So that's like the difference between median and mean, where you have probably a lot of doctors and lawyers who are skewing the average, where hopefully those people are going to be able to enter the job force with 6-figure incomes or close to it and be able to pay down that debt faster. But I think that's skewing the average higher, where the average American with a 4-year bachelor's degree isn't going to have $100,000 in student loan debt. I know some people do, but hopefully that's obviously the minority. So, the big problem, and you mentioned a ton of them, but one that I think of is you have 17-year-olds making these choices. Right. I wasn't smart enough at 17 to make this choice, and if you have parents that didn't go to college or just don't understand the financial impact, and in their mind, they just know their kid needs to go to college to kind of further themselves and better their career prospects, that's a hard thing to do when you have a 17-year-old and kind of parents pushing you that route. So something about that process, I don't know if it's financial literacy or, we just kind of have to take the stigma away of not everyone needs to go to college. I don't know the answer, but yeah, it's just at 17, who is ready to make that decision? I don't think many people are.
I do think that there could be something that could be done to help those that are struggling today, because, I mean, there's some people that to your point, they didn't know any better. They were taking advantage. I mean, it's predatory lending is basically what it is. I mean, going to people who don't know any better and giving them this opportunity to have the ability to take on this debt. They couldn't go buy a mortgage. They couldn't get a mortgage. They couldn't go buy a car, but they can get all this student loan debt. So that's not to say that maybe there can't be some type of program that would be income based and help with maybe freezing the interest or something so people can actually make traction. I think there's the opportunity to do something to help, but don't wipe out everybody's. Because what about I guess if you're in a position to where you paid off your student loans early on, then you're in a better position than others. But what about people that busted it and did things the right way? And this is going to sound like a very elitist, privileged thing, but they worked hard, they saved, they paid down their loans, and then all of a sudden they could have just not done that and had it taken care of. I think wiping it clean doesn't help, but I think that for people who are heavy in student loan debt and not making a high enough income, I would be less against coming up with some type of program to help them get through that student loan debt, helping with consolidating, lowering interest rates, stopping the interest, like making it so, okay, banks, you're still going to get a little bit of yours, but you took advantage of these people. So we're going to limit that, but we're not going to put the whole taxpayer on the hook to wipe out everybody's student loan debt.
And that doesn't fix the leading cause, which is the cost.
Right.
Right.
And that's what we need. Like, that's where the focus needs to be. And educating too. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I feel bad having that conversation because for every, 10 people that shouldn't be getting help, there's somebody who should. And I don't want to be insensitive to those people that really did try to do things the right way. That college was the only way to break out of poverty. So they took student loans to do that, and then they're not where they want to be, and now they can't make any traction. Like, I'm very sympathetic to that, and those are the people I think I want to see get help. But I don't want to see somebody who's just using their student loans to go on spring break and do all the other things that we know people do, and now they want to get bailed out. I'm not a big fan of that. So I'm not totally heartless. It may seem like it, but I'm really not. All right, let's move on before I make myself seem like more of a dick.
If you want to send hate mail, send it to allaboutyourbenjamins.com. So our last post of this week is about Steph Curry, and it's titled 4,000 to 1 long shot. This was a pretty long post, but I did my best to read it. Justin, you want to share about this one?
Yeah, so Ryan Kruger wrote it. I'm pretty sure Kruger's how you say his last name. And it is highlighting a comparison of Steph Curry and his rise to being the greatest shooter the NBA's ever seen, and comparing it to having a financial plan. And honestly, like, what I enjoyed the most, and I don't mean this to minimize Ryan's overall point, I enjoyed all of the research that he did when it came to Steph Curry and his training and his statistics and all those things. So Roman loves Steph Curry. That's his favorite NBA player. So I'm making him read this with me tonight because there's little things that Steph did to make himself a better shooter that I want Roman to do. So I don't want to make this all about basketball, but that's really what I liked. I think it's pretty cool when somebody can take something not financial like basketball and Steph Curry and apply it to financial planning and the importance of it. So one of his quotes that he said, "Discipline unlocks greater vision." I really liked that. And he was talking about Steph's discipline with some of the trainings that he does allows him to become a better basketball player, but that also helps with our planning. If we have more discipline with our planning and with our budgeting, we have a bigger vision of where we're going and what we can do, and it allows us to have a better plan. So, so that was a lot of what I really liked about that. I don't want to take away all of it. I think it's one that you should take the time to read, which I know people tune in to get our opinion on things, but I think this is one I want to put in front of you and let you read and enjoy, especially if you're a basketball fan.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting just how Steph has progressed from when he was in like high school to all the way where he is now. And the way this is written is it kind of compares it to the financial planning process, right? So every step of the way it says, Steph did this to improve his handle, or he did this to improve his shooting, or he did this to move better without the ball. And then he compared all that to the financial plan and the decisions we have to make to have a financial plan, and one that's going to stand the test of time and become better and kind of help us out. So I thought that was interesting how it was interwoven throughout the post. And I learned a lot about how kind of Steph has prepared himself. Now, obviously, you never know how much is natural talent compared to hard work, compared to luck, to all those things. But you can definitely see that he's putting in the time to be the best that he can be.
Yep. What do you got for recommendations this week?
So I just have one recommendation. It was a podcast. He was on Ted Seide's Capital Allocators podcast, and I know you listened to this episode too. I thought it was awesome. I'm a big fan of Kay's. And Ted Seide's in this interview kind of just pokes the bear, I like to say, and then got out of the way while Kay just spoke. And he's just so good at what he does, and kind of explains how he went from this high-powered career in hedge funds to now where he's leading a life of purpose, where they moved out to California because he wants to surf every day, and he's able to spend more time with his kids, and he's doing the work that he likes, which is writing, creating these social media kind of campaigns and things like that. So I find Kay very interesting, and this was a great interview of him.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I listen to Kay anytime I can, and he actually was on All About Your Benjamins, and I was listening to the conversation. I was like, man, Ted did such a better job than I did getting Kay just to go. So I mentioned that on Twitter, and Kay kind of chimed back. I asked him about 21 Savage and Tekashi 6ix9ine. We were talking about rap because he's a hip hop fan too. He's like, Ted didn't ask me about that, so it made me feel good that he kind of came back. No, you did okay, but no, it was phenomenal. Ted got way more out of Kay than I did, which makes me want to go back and try to get a second attempt with him. But it was real good, and I like Kay's view on his life and what he's tried to structure and do. So I concur, it was a good one. My recommendation, going into No Buy July, that starts next week.
Starts tomorrow.
Yeah, I gotta go buy some today. Just kidding. I did some traveling last week or 2 weeks ago now, and it's the first time I got to use my Away luggage. So I don't know if you're familiar with Away, but it's just a brand of luggage that I thought was real good. So I heard about them on NPR's How I Built This. So I'm a big brand person, and hearing the story of how the woman who started it got it done and just made me really like it. So I looked into it. It has real good reviews. It's not overly expensive for luggage, and it's supposed to last longer. So I was a big fan of my Away luggage. The way that it is built, I was able to cram more stuff in than I usually am, and it was more organized. So I'm a fan of Away luggage. That was my recommendation. You got anything else?
That's it.
All right. Well, show notes are where they always are. allaboutyourbenjamins.com, ferventfinance.com. Hopefully the video and audio will match up this week. So this video will be on YouTube because last week it was taking way too long to edit. So I just said, forget it. So thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you all in the next episode.
Have a great week.